In RideBack, we are presented with Rin Ogata going through a crisis where she is forced to confront her place in Japanese society and formulate a socio-political identity due to the violent convergence of adversarial political forces. During this crisis, Rin is faced with increasing pressures to take a position, with a final decision to stand and resist government forces or face potentially permanent exile from Japan. This is interesting in large part due to Rin's background and identity as a young Japanese woman who is initially apathetic and unaware of politics. Women are very underrepresented in Japan's political systems. Though Japanese women first exercised the right to stand as candidates in 1946, the political culture of Japan has remained largely male-dominated. Women, political parties, and the general public have typically thought of politics as men's business. It wasn't until the late 1980s that the Japanese people began to consider that women could play an important role in politics. This is due to various factors. Mikiko notes one such factor is Japanese people tend to avoid behavior that could be construed as aggressive or assertive, and women in particular are under greater pressure to be reserved and not speak out. Active political participation would directly contradict these expectations, and is thus discouraged. These socio-cultural factors are very much reflected in Rin's internal conflicts with her own identity. From the very beginning of the story, Rin frames changes in her life against the backdrop of political change. Her identity as a ballet dancer, as one who performs due to the expectations of her mother and society as a whole, is metaphorically and literally in line with Japan's socio-cultural expectations around women. She herself describes her life as separate and disconnected from political events. However, over the course of the story, we see Rin forced to engage with political actors and circumstances, and we observe her gradual transformation into someone capable of taking an active role in the political landscape unfolding around her. But this transformation is not without conflict, for Rin must find a way to resolve the socio-cultural expectations of her past with the circumstances and actions of her present. This is really interesting. Over the course of her transformation, we see Rin expressing non-hegemonic femininity. A great example of this is in episode 4, when Rin decides to charge into the city on Fuego during an active terrorist attack to save her friend Shoko. This is a traditionally masculine role, with a damsel in distress and everything. The boys attempt to convince Rin not to go, but her emotions push her to intervene. It's made clear that it's this emotional and maternal need to protect her friend which drives her to action. At first, Rin doesn't have an understanding of her actions and feelings, of her changing identity. The intensity she feels when she rides Fuego and acts to resist those who would hurt her or the people close to her is alien to her. She is paralyzed by the internal contradiction of her socio-cultural conditioning and her role as a political actor, and she agonizes over the repercussions of her decisions. In episode 11, she is faced with the prospect of fleeing Japan, potentially never to return, losing her connections to everyone she cares about. It is in this moment that she considers all she has been through and resolves her internal conflicts. She realizes that the only path she can take that is true to herself is to remain in Japan and to fight for what she believes in. This clearly frames Rin as a role model for Japanese youth, particularly young women. In experiencing Rin's metamorphosis from an apolitical, obedient subject to a rebellious political dissident, the audience is given the opportunity to imagine a similar transformation in themselves.